One claim, one denial, and suddenly, the entire world stopped breathing. A cruise missile, fired near the most critical shipping lane on Earth, carrying 21% of the world's oil. Was it real? Was it a lie? Or was it something far more dangerous than either? Because here is what no one is telling you, whether the missile hit or didn't. The damage is already done. Markets are moving, navies are repositioning, and somewhere in a boardroom right now, a decision is being made that will affect your business, your investments, your future. The question is, are you ready for what comes next? Welcome to Crunchy Watch. Now, before we go any further, if you are someone who has lived long enough to know that the real news is never the headline they show you, then my friend, this channel was built for you. Go ahead and press that subscribe button. Think of it like locking your front door at night. You might not always need it, but the one time you do, you will be very glad you did it. And tell us in the comments below, where in the world are you watching this from today? Because from Karachi to London, from Dubai to New York, this story touches every one of us. Now, let us begin. The morning started like any other morning near the Strait of Hormuz. Ships moved slowly through the narrow blue water. Oil tankers carried millions of barrels toward Europe and Asia. Military vessels watched quietly from a distance. The sun rose over the Persian Gulf the same way it always did. But then, something changed. A report came out of Tehran. Iranian sources claimed that their forces had launched cruise missiles and struck a major American warship near the Strait of Hormuz. The claim spread fast. Within minutes, it was everywhere. News channels picked it up. Financial markets began to shake. Oil prices moved. Military analysts started making phone calls. The world had just been handed a grenade, and no one knew yet if the pin had been pulled. According to Iranian state sources, this was not an accident. This was not a warning shot. This was, they claimed, a direct and deliberate military strike on a United States Navy vessel, one of the most powerful symbols of American military strength in the region. The language coming from Tehran was confident. It was precise. They gave details. They named the location. They described the type of missiles used. To many listeners, it sounded like a real military communique, not a bluff, not propaganda. And that was exactly the point. Because in the world of geopolitics, perception is power. What people believe happened can be just as dangerous as what actually happened. Iran understood this. They had studied this game for decades, and on this particular morning, they played it with great skill. Washington's response came quickly, and it was firm. United States military officials denied the claim entirely. No American warship had been hit. No casualties had been reported. No damage had been confirmed. The Pentagon pushed back hard, calling the Iranian statement false and calling it dangerous misinformation. But here is where the story becomes truly interesting. A denial, in a moment of high tension, does not always calm the storm. Sometimes it makes the storm louder, because now the world had two completely opposite stories. Iran said yes, America said no, and the rest of the world was left standing in the middle, not knowing which version to believe. That uncertainty, that space between claim and denial, is where the real danger lives. To understand why this single report shook the entire world, one must first understand where this happened. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a body of water. It is the throat of the global economy. It is a narrow channel, only 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, sitting between Iran on one side and Oman and the United Arab Emirates on the other. Every single day, approximately 17 to 21 million barrels of oil pass through this strait. That is nearly 1/5 of all the oil consumed on Earth. Every day, moving through this one tiny corridor of water. If that corridor is threatened, oil stops moving. If oil stops moving, energy prices explode. If energy prices explode, industries slow down, supply chains break, businesses lose money, ordinary people pay more for fuel, food, and goods. One strait, one incident, one unverified claim, and the entire machine of global commerce begins to tremble. What this incident revealed was something that serious analysts and experienced business minds already knew. The global economy is not as strong as it looks from the outside. It is held together by a series of very thin threads. Trade routes, diplomatic agreements, military deterrence, mutual economic interest. And when even one of those threads is pulled, even slightly, the entire structure begins to shake. The claimed strike near the Strait of Hormuz, whether real or manufactured, pulled one of those threads. One pipe, carrying nearly 1/5 of everything the modern world needs to function. One pipe that feeds factories in Germany, powers hospitals in Japan, fuels delivery trucks in America, and keeps the lights on in homes across South Asia. Now imagine someone places their hand around that pipe. Not squeezing yet, just holding it. That is exactly what happened the moment the claim came out of the Strait of Hormuz. And what most people watching the news did not realize was that the real story had nothing to do with missiles. It had everything to do with money. The invisible tax that nobody votes for. Within hours of the Iranian claim hitting international headlines, something quietly happened in the global energy market. Oil prices moved, not because a single drop of oil had been spilled, not because one tanker had been stopped or redirected, but simply because fear entered the market. And in the world of commodities and energy trading, fear is a currency. It buys panic, it sells stability, and it charges everyone, whether they are watching the news or not. This is what experienced economists call a risk premium. When a critical supply route feels threatened, buyers begin paying more for oil today because they are afraid there will be less oil available tomorrow. That extra cost moves silently through the entire global economy. It raises fuel prices, it increases manufacturing costs, it pushes up shipping rates, it quietly inflates the price of almost everything that moves from one country to another. Ordinary people never see this mechanism. They only see the number at the petrol pump going up. They wonder why. They blame their government. They blame inflation. But the real answer was born in a 33-kilometer stretch of water, thousands of miles away. Why choke points are the world's most dangerous economic weapons. The Strait of Hormuz is not the only choke point that holds the global economy hostage, but it is the most powerful one. History has already shown what happens when the strait is threatened. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, attacks on oil tankers in the Gulf sent energy markets into chaos. In 2019, mysterious explosions on tankers near the Strait of Hormuz caused immediate oil price spikes and triggered emergency meetings among the world's largest economies. And in 2021, when a single cargo ship blocked the Suez Canal for just 6 days, the global shipping industry lost an estimated $9 billion per day. 6 days, one ship. $9 billion every single day. Now, consider this. The Strait of Hormuz is not blocked by one ship. It is threatened by missiles, by military posturing, by a conflict that has been building for decades between two of the world's most strategically important nations. The economic consequences of a real escalation here would not last 6 days. They could last 6 months or longer. What smart businesses are already doing. Here is where the story shifts from global economics to practical business strategy. The most sophisticated companies in the world do not wait for confirmation. They do not wait for the Pentagon to issue a final statement. They do not wait for oil prices to stabilize before making decisions. They move early. They move quietly. And they move with information that most people do not yet have. Shipping companies began reviewing their Gulf route contracts. Energy traders started adjusting their hedging positions. Airlines quietly began calculating the cost of alternative fuel procurement. Insurance companies that cover maritime cargo started having very serious internal conversations about premium adjustments. None of this made the headlines, but all of it was already happening. Because the business world operates on a simple and brutal truth. By the time a crisis becomes obvious to everyone, it is already too late for most people to protect themselves. The warning, hidden inside the chaos. What the Strait of Hormuz incident truly revealed was not a military threat. It revealed a structural weakness that has always existed inside the global economy. A weakness that powerful nations, corporations, and strategic investors have always known about, but ordinary business owners and young entrepreneurs rarely consider until the damage is already done. The world does not break all at once. It breaks quietly, through choke points, through supply chains, through energy corridors that most people cannot even find on a map. And right now, one of those corridors was under the most intense scrutiny it had seen in years. There's a rule that every serious strategist knows. In geopolitics, nothing is ever exactly what it appears to be. Not the headline, not the denial, not the claim, not even the silence that follows. Every move made by a nation-state, every statement released by a military, every carefully worded press briefing is a calculated act, a piece placed on a board, a signal sent to someone, somewhere, who knows exactly how to read it. And on the day that Iran claimed a strike on a United States warship near the Strait of Hormuz, both Tehran and Washington were not just talking to each other, they were talking to the entire world. The question serious analysts must ask is not whether the missile hit. The question is, why this claim, in this place, at this exact moment in history? Iran's calculation, the art of maximum pressure. With minimum risk, Iran is not a reckless nation. That is one of the most dangerous misunderstandings the Western world has carried for decades. Iran is patient. It is strategic. It has survived crippling economic sanctions, military threats, internal unrest, and decades of international isolation. And through all of it, it has never stopped playing the long game. When Iranian sources released the claim of a strike on a U.S. warship, They did so knowing exactly what would happen next. Oil prices would move. American military credibility would be questioned. Regional allies of Washington would grow nervous. And most importantly, Iran would send a very clear message to every nation watching. We are not afraid, and we have options you cannot fully predict. This is what military strategists call strategic ambiguity. It is the deliberate use of unclear, unverified, and unconfirmed information to create confusion in the mind of the enemy. Confusion costs money. It forces governments to reposition military assets. It pressures diplomats to make phone calls. It pulls decision makers away from other priorities. And it costs Iran almost nothing. A claim is free. The reaction to that claim is priceless. America's calculation, the burden of being the superpower. Washington's position in this moment was deeply uncomfortable, and for very specific reasons. The United States has maintained a powerful naval presence in the Persian Gulf for decades. The Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain, represents one of the most significant expressions of American military power in the world. It is there to protect oil flows, to deter aggression, to signal strength to allies and enemies alike. But here is the uncomfortable truth that serious analysts understand. Superpowers have more to lose from ambiguity than smaller nations do. When Iran makes a claim, the world asks America to respond. And however America responds, it carries consequences. If Washington responds too aggressively, it risks escalation in a region already stretched to its limits. If it responds too softly, allies in Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the UAE begin to question whether American protection is real or merely symbolic. This is the trap that Iran understands perfectly. Every claim, every incident, every moment of strategic ambiguity near the Strait of Hormuz forces America to spend political capital, military resources, diplomatic energy. And in a world where Washington is already managing tensions with China over Taiwan and carefully watching the situation in Eastern Europe, every dollar of attention spent on Iran is a dollar taken from somewhere else. The proxy architecture, how this war is already being fought. What most business audiences do not fully appreciate is that the conflict between the United States and Iran is not waiting to begin. It has already been running, quietly, for years. Through proxy forces across Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, Iran has built a network of influence that stretches across the entire Middle East. These are not random militant groups. They are carefully cultivated strategic assets, funded, trained, and directed with specific geopolitical objectives in mind. Similarly, the United States has maintained its own network of military bases, intelligence operations, and economic pressure campaigns through sanctions that have strangled the Iranian economy for decades. Both nations have been fighting each other, without ever officially declaring war. What happened near the Strait of Hormuz was not the beginning of something new. It was the latest visible moment in a conflict that never truly stopped. The moment that changes the calculation forever. But here is where the analysis becomes deeply important for serious decision makers. There's a threshold in every prolonged strategic conflict, a point where calculated moves, proxy battles, and deliberate ambiguity are no longer enough to contain the pressure building on both sides. History has a name for what happens when that threshold is crossed. It is not called strategy anymore. It is called war. And the Strait of Hormuz, with its impossible economic importance, its narrow geography, and its decades of accumulated tension, is one of the few places on Earth where that threshold could be crossed by accident. One miscalculation, one commander making a decision in a moment of confusion, one missile fired based on wrong information, one denial that comes too late. The strategic game between Washington and Tehran has always carried this risk buried inside it. But today, that risk feels closer to the surface than it has in a very long time. Every crisis in history has made some people poorer and some people significantly richer, not because the wealthy are lucky, not because they have special connections, not because the world is unfair, although sometimes it is, but because in every moment of global disruption, there are those who react and those who respond. Reaction is emotional. It is panic selling. It is freezing. It is waiting for the news to tell you what to do next. Response is strategic. It is calm. It is calculated. It is the quiet movement of a chess piece. While everyone else is still arguing about whether the board is real, the Strait of Hormuz incident has created exactly this moment. And right now, the most important question any serious business mind must ask is not what happened. The question is, what do I do with what I now know? The first move, understand your exposure. Before the market, does most business owners and young entrepreneurs make one critical mistake during geopolitical crises? They wait. They wait for certainty. They wait for official confirmation. They wait for the situation to become clear before making any decisions. And by the time clarity arrives, the opportunity to protect themselves or position themselves advantageously has already passed. The very first move any serious decision maker must make right now is a brutally honest audit of their own exposure to this crisis. Ask these questions immediately. Does your business depend on imported goods that travel through Gulf shipping routes? Do your suppliers source raw materials from the Middle East? Does your industry depend on stable fuel prices to maintain profit margins? Are your investment portfolios carrying significant energy sector exposure without any hedging strategy in place? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then this crisis is not happening somewhere far away on a television screen. It is happening inside your balance sheet, right now. The second move. Energy is the nervous system of every business. Here is something that business schools teach, but most entrepreneurs forget the moment they open their first company. Energy is not just a utility bill. Energy is the invisible foundation underneath every single cost in your business. It moves your goods. It powers your factory. It heats your office. It determines the price your supplier charges you, which determines the price you charge your customer, which determines whether your business survives the next 12 months or quietly disappears. When the Strait of Hormuz is under threat, energy becomes unstable. And when energy becomes unstable, every business that is not prepared begins bleeding money from 100 small wounds simultaneously. The smart response is not to panic about fuel prices. The smart response is to immediately review every energy-dependent cost in your operation. Identify where you are most vulnerable and begin building a buffer before the price shock arrives at your door, because it will arrive. The only question is whether you're standing behind a wall when it does or standing directly in its path. The third move. Volatility is not the enemy. Ignorance is. This is perhaps the most important lesson the Strait of Hormuz incident offers to the business community. Volatility, by itself, does not destroy businesses. Ignorance of volatility does. Throughout history, the most significant transfers of wealth have not happened during periods of stability and calm. They have happened during exactly these moments. Moments of geopolitical tension, moments of supply chain disruption, moments when the majority of market participants are confused, frightened, and making emotional decisions. In 2020, when the world locked down and global markets collapsed, certain investors and entrepreneurs who understood what was actually happening made generational wealth in a matter of months. They did not have secret information. They simply had clarity, while everyone around them had chaos. The Strait of Hormuz situation offers the same dynamic. Energy stocks, shipping insurance companies, alternative energy providers, domestic supply chain businesses, defense sector investments. These are not random suggestions. They are the logical conclusions of a clear strategic analysis applied to the current geopolitical reality. While the crowd watches the news in fear, serious minds are already building positions. The fourth move, build a business that can survive. Choke points. Perhaps the deepest lesson this entire situation teaches is one that goes beyond this specific crisis. The world has choke points, not just geographical ones like the Strait of Hormuz, but economic choke points, supply chain choke points, single supplier dependencies, single currency exposures, single market concentrations. Every business that depends entirely on one route, one supplier, one market, one energy source is a business that is one crisis away from serious trouble. The entrepreneurs and business builders who will thrive in the decade ahead are those who are building resilient businesses today, businesses with diversified supply chains, businesses with multiple revenue streams, businesses that have thought carefully about what happens when the world does exactly what it always eventually does, becomes unpredictable. The final word. The claim from the Strait of Hormuz may be confirmed. It may be denied. It may quietly disappear from the headlines within days, replaced by the next crisis, the next claim, the next moment of global uncertainty. But the lesson it carries will not disappear. The global economy is fragile, energy is political, supply chains are vulnerable, and the businesses that understand these truths today are the ones that will still be standing when the next crisis arrives tomorrow. The world does not reward those who wait for safety. It rewards those who prepare before the storm arrives. This has been Crunchy Watch. If this analysis gave you genuine value today, share it with someone in your circle who is building something serious. And if you have not yet subscribed, do it now, because the next story we are tracking may be even more important than this one. Stay sharp, stay strategic, and we will see you in the next one.